Hello everyone. So recently I've been playing Sonic Superstars on the Nintendo Switch. It's pretty fun. 4 playable characters. I'm liking all these references to the classic Sonic badniks here. And it looks nice and colourful on my Nintendo Switch OLED screen. I don't think it's my favourite ever Sonic game, but I thought it was pretty good, and it's always fun to play a bit of Sonic on the go. But it did get me thinking. Sonic has had a long storied history on handhelds. They are some of my favourite memories of the franchise. If we travel back in time to 2017, we have Sonic Mania, one of his very best outings, and it was exciting having it available in portable form. Bear in mind the portability of the Switch was quite new and novel at the time. In 2016 there was Sonic Boom Fire and Ice on Nintendo 3DS, the third game based on that Sonic Boom cartoon series. And I thought it was okay. It was probably better than the last 2 Sonic Boom titles, but that's not really saying much. Go back even further to 2005 and it's Sonic Rush on the dual screens of the Nintendo DS, introducing a brand new character, Blaze the Cat, and featured an amazing soundtrack by Hideki Naganuma of Jet Set Radio fame, all of which is sadly completely ruined by Sonic's incessant chatter. In 2001, Sega officially left the hardware business and I was left mourning the discontinuation of my beloved Sega Dreamcast. But it was a new beginning for Sega, and to ease a little bit of my pain, we did have the very first installment of a brand new Sonic trilogy, Sonic Advance for the Game Boy Advance. I quite liked all 3 of these games and added a couple more characters to this Sonic legacy. But just a few years before, we have Sonic Pocket Adventure on the Neo Geo Pocket. Fantastic game and all, and supremely underrated hardware, but I always found Sonic a little finicky to control on that clicky stick. Oh, but I do love that clicky stick. Sorry, moving on. There's so many games and hardware I haven't mentioned, but let's travel back to the year of 1991, where all of Sonic's handheld adventures truly began. Sonic the Hedgehog on Sega Game Gear. Sega's answer to the Nintendo Game Boy. Unlike the Game Boy, the Game Gear featured full colour graphics and a backlit screen. It was incredible to see back then, especially when compared to that old pea soup green screen of the Game Boy. But as we all know, the Game Gear was nowhere near as successful as the Game Boy. How could it compete with such a massive library, featuring the likes of Super Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon, to name just a few. Sorry, Sega. And all that extra power did come at a cost. This thing ate batteries like there was no tomorrow. And also, my old Game Gear went up in smoke many years ago. But when it was working, I loved the Game Gear, Sonic included. Released shortly after the debut of Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Mega Drive of that very same year, Sonic the Hedgehog, oh this is confusing, 8-bit Sonic the Hedgehog appeared on both Game Gear and Sega Master System, the predecessor to the Mega Drive. Aside a few minor differences such as the screen resolution and slightly different graphics, these 2 versions are largely the same. It kinda looks like somebody forgot to draw Sonic's nose in the Game Gear version. What's up with that? I have a lot of fond memories of these 2 versions. I didn't own a Mega Drive at the time, but I did get to play Sonic on Master System with my cousin. And when my original Game Gear was working before it went up in smoke, Sonic was definitely a favourite. Developed by Ancient, who would later go on to work on the Streets of Rage series, and the company was founded by legendary Japanese composer Yuzo Koshiro. So as to be expected, the soundtrack is quite good. I think 8-bit Sonic the Hedgehog is my second favourite game to be titled Sonic the Hedgehog. No, not that one. I love this game so much, I just couldn't resist grabbing this Japanese release here. Just look at this incredible artwork. While I may look back on it rather fondly nowadays, at the time I was less than satisfied. I did already have a taste of the 16-bit Sonic games, and I was immensely jealous of my Mega Drive owning friends. The 16-bit editions had amazing looking graphics and an incredible sense of speed. whereas 8-bit Sonic here just felt more like a regular old platform game. And there's not even one of those giant loop-de-loops to be found here. Ironically, you could break the game by going a little bit too fast. There were many different 8-bit Sonic titles released for both Game Gear and Master System, this time without Ancient's involvement. Some of these games are kind of weird. Oh, I really like Tails' Adventures actually. But there was one Sonic title which, at the time, I considered it to be the very best of his handheld adventures. A portable Sonic that managed to recreate some of that unique feel in the Mega Drive titles. I am of course talking about Sonic Triple Trouble by developer Aspet, released in 1994 exclusively for the Sega Game Gear. No Sega Master System port this time. I assume the Triple Trouble in the title is referring to the triple threat of Dr. Robotnik, aka Dr. Eggman, Knuckles the Echidna, and brand new rival Knack the Weasel, or Fang the Sniper in Japan, which sounds a lot cooler. I'm just going to call him that from now on. I was very glad to see him make his triumphant return in Sonic Superstars. It's been quite a while since we last saw him. Triple Trouble is the sequel to the previous 8-bit Sonic platformer Sonic Chaos, and it's even marketed as such via the Japanese release, which was titled Sonic and Tails 2. Illustrator Greg Martin, a frequent contributor to the Sonic franchise and perhaps several of your favourite VHS covers, once again provided Sonic artwork for the Western and European box art. It's some of my favourite ever Sonic artwork actually, but as to be expected, the Japanese packaging is pretty amazing. A lot of artwork pulled from the Japanese manual of Sonic 3, although I'm not quite sure if I've seen some of these illustrations in here. Out of all these weird 8-bit Sonic titles, I still think it was Triple Trouble that came the closest to recreating that feel of the 16-bit Sonic trilogy. The loop-de-loops and speedy gameplay of Sonic are here, even if the physics and the movement isn't quite as graceful as they are from the Mega Drive. I do remember the graphics being a real highlight. They look fantastic on that blurry old Game Gear screen. The soundtrack is also quite good, with one or two pieces of music I still find myself humming along to this very day. I am sure many Sonic fans will be quick to point out the surprisingly epic piece of music that plays during the train sequence. And admittedly, it was pretty cool to see familiar faces such as Knuckles and even Metal Sonic in 8-bit. Newcomer Fang in particular looks great and nicely animated. Just a shame that him and Knuckles aren't fully playable. Gameplay is your standard Sonic affair. Sonic can both spin dash and perform his super peel out from Sonic CD. Tails is also fully playable here and retains his flight capabilities from the mainline Sonic games, making his playthrough slightly easier. Collect 50 rings in a stage and then locate an emerald monitor to transport yourself to the special stage before squaring off against Fang. There are only 6 emeralds in the game, but you will only need to collect 5 of them to earn the true ending. It's a pretty easy game overall, and no Super Sonic isn't here, I'm afraid. Unlike in Sonic Chaos, where Tails was relegated to be in the game's easy mode, he must also collect every emerald in the game to earn the true ending. The ending sequence is still the same, but rather hilariously, it always looked to me as though Knuckles was giving him some serious hover hand here. Come on mate, just shake the guy's hand already. Playing the game nowadays, it is still perfectly fine. The controls do feel a tad unwieldy. The level design is somewhat unremarkable, but it was always the fun gimmicks I remembered enjoying the most. Like this snowboard sequence here, or the rocket shoes which return from Sonic Chaos. It is a little surprising that Triple Trouble never saw an official Master System port like Sonic's previous 8-bit adventures, but there is a fan-made modification from 2017 that does at least increase the real estate of the screen. It does suffer from a couple of weird graphical issues though. So forgive me for showing off a little now. I replayed my old cartridge on my modified Sega Game Gear last year, just before I acquired my Analog Pocket, and I replayed the game again using the Game Gear adapter on it. It looks incredible on that screen. I'm liking all these different filter options to recreate that blurry old look of the Game Gear screen without wasting tons of batteries or ruining my eyesight. Sonic Triple Trouble is perhaps not quite as good as I remember if I'm being totally honest. But many years ago, this was the definitive handheld Sonic experience to me, and it's nice I've managed to hold on to my original copy from all those years ago. I think I bought it from Woolworths. But Perhaps the very best thing about Sonic Triple Trouble is if you simply take your cartridge here, slot it into an original Mega Drive console, switch it on, and suddenly the graphics become 16-bit. Even the music gets an upgrade. It's amazing! Oh, how I wish this was true. No, in reality what you're seeing here is a fan-made remake by a mostly one-man dev team, Copeland. It's a completely free download, and I put a link in the description of the video if you're interested. At first glance, I didn't think the game was going to be anything special. Not to discredit them, but there are already dozens of fan-made Sonic remakes out there. But it almost immediately becomes apparent that Triple Trouble 16-bit is far more ambitious than just a mere graphical update. In fact, it feels more of a reimagining of the old game. And for what it's worth, I think it's even better than the original. The gameplay is pretty much Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Level design has been greatly improved with a couple of new areas to explore, and those old level gimmicks have been expanded upon while adding in many new ones. And just look at this, the game even becomes a Mega CD title. Special stages are now more of a typical Sonic affair, but I do love that it gives you the option to retry them at the cost of an extra life if you fail. I also like that you can switch between the Western and Japanese titles. That's a neat touch. Dare I say the true final boss is even better than the somewhat anticlimactic final of Sonic Mania. It does have the rough edges of what you'd expect from a Sonic fan project, but there are plenty of moments where Triple Trouble 16-bit almost feels like an official release. You are now able to switch between Sonic and Tails during gameplay. Knuckles is now fully playable and even has his own slightly different campaign to play through. It even ties the narrative together with the events of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And even Fang and Amy Rose are also a part of the playable roster, though sadly they are limited to just the free play mode, which isn't quite as exciting. I should mention that I'm afraid you can't play this remake on an analog pocket, but I'm sure you could get it running on a Steam Deck if you're fortunate enough to own one, which isn't me, I'm afraid. I wasted all my money on Game Boy games. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that little look back on a small selection of Sonic's handheld history, the Sega Game Gear and Sonic Triple Trouble. And perhaps in future I can follow up sometime by having another look at one of the many other Sonic games I've got lying around here. But until then, thanks ever so much for watching. Take care.